Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome one of our pioneering consultant ophthalmic surgeons, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Eric Arnott.
Harold, Elizabeth, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. It is, I think, always difficult doing after-dinner speaking. Tonight is particularly difficult, speaking in the presence of our great peer, Harold. I will, however, do my best. I feel even more sorry for some of our speakers after me, because poor old Peter Choice is sandwiched between two Irishmen. I think we would all very much like to thank Arthur Swain, Donnie Munro, and Ian Collins for producing Dinner Tonight in such a spectacular surroundings. The whole of our theme tonight is aviation and medicine. And most of you are overawed by this aeroplane which is just about to descend upon you. And this is actually the original Alcock and Brown plane which landed in Connemara, hence the Irish speakers tonight, on June the 14th, 1919. And this was a Vickers Vimy with Rolls-Royce engines. It took 16 hours to fly the Atlantic, and it came down at an angle of 45 degrees, and yet here it is intact. A wonderful further achievement in what the Brits have done. And it's amazing to think that it's only 21 years after that event that the Battle of Britain was raging over our heads. And in that battle, many British as well as German pilots were killed, had serious injuries, were burned, and many of them suffered serious injuries to their eyes from the goggles and canopies which blew up in their faces. And Sir Winston Churchill has said, the most memorable statement probably of all time, that never in the field of human conquest has so much been owed by so many to so few. Now, it is impossible to elaborate on that. The sacrifice, courage, and fortitude of those pilots is beyond anything that we can measure. But it may be apt to use numerically that comparison with what we are all sitting around today. Harold Ridley, the original icon of what has happened, with his early pioneers. And aren't we privileged to have so many of them here today? We have here today Slava and Arini Fedorov from Moscow. We have Teddy and Lisa Epstein from South Africa. We've already gone across the whole span of this world. And we have David Apple here from America, not here. He's going to be back in full active duty, I'm glad to say, by January the 12th. But we've got represented here his beautiful wife, Anne, and his daughter. And let us also remember affectionately John Pierce, who has his wife Judith here with us tonight. Now, during the same time as the Battle of Britain, many of our buildings here in London were destroyed. And one of these is only 2 miles from here, St. James's, Piccadilly. Beautifully restored Wren Church. Many of you must have gone into that church, and in the foyer there is a very large brass plaque. And it is in the memory of Sir William Bowman of Moorfields Eye Hospital, who was the greatest eye surgeon of the last century. And if you read his epitaph, it says, "Ye that have eyes but cannot see, in darkness and in misery, behold the mighty voices free." Now, nobody in this room can say that Harold couldn't see. Harold started the work, and it is just 50 years, 6 hours, 37 minutes, 37 seconds since Doreen Ogg, the theatre sister at St. Thomas's Hospital, assisted Harold Ridley to put in the first implant. Now, if we go back to those days in 1940, Harold Ridley was consultant at Moorfields Eye Hospital. And he was at that time not very much older than the fighter pilots that he was treating. And one of those fighter pilots, and Harold Ridley realized that in these fighter pilots, the retained intraocular foreign bodies of PMMA remained totally inert. Now, one of those fighter pilots was Mouse Cleaver, whose sister-in-law, we are very pleased, is with us here tonight. Now, Mouse Cleaver was, like Sir Winston Churchill and myself, an old Harrovian. He was, before the war, a champion skier, and he was an ace fighter pilot. He was sent from Salisbury Infirmary to Moorfields Eye Hospital. He was actually referred to Sir Stuart Duke Elder in Moorfields. And of course, as we all know, Sir Stuart was the most wonderful administrator, right, etc., but he didn't operate very much. And so the care of this patient, like so many of the other fighter pilots, went to Harold Ridley. And Mouse Cleaver actually had 17 eye operations over the next few months. And I think the history of Mouse is interesting because he had one eye totally destroyed by his injuries. His other eye had a large hole in the iris through which the PMMA had entered the lens. Despite that, he had normal vision for 30 years until he developed a cataract, when he had, of course, phacoemulsification and a new bit of PMMA inserted into the eye. Now, I think the history of the event of Mouse Cleaver is not without interest. August the 13th, 1940 was about the darkest day in our history. But it was actually also the day when the Battle of Britain turned into our favor. And Mouse Cleaver was brought up from Tangmere to Goodwood. Goodwood Racecourse was actually the advanced fighter base at that time. And Mouse Cleaver had already had one sortie, and he landed. He was in the officers' mess, and they were re-scrambled. And he rushed into his Hurricane plane, pulled out the throttle, and it had another Rolls-Royce engine, but advanced from that one. This was the Rolls-Royce Merlin V12. And of course, by pulling out the choke, he flooded the warm engine, and so the plane was incapacitated. So he thought that was the end of his action for the day. And he went back to the officers' mess, and his commanding officer, Cleaver, he said, it's not as simple as that. There's actually a brand new Hurricane out there. You can use that. So he got into that hurricane. And then he realized, and his sister-in-law verified, that they hadn't issued goggles into this hurricane, hence part of the drama of this story. He'd had combat, and he was on his way back to Goodwood, when at 7,000 feet over Winchester Cathedral, an ME-109 shot at him and shattered the canopy of his plane. He was instantly blinded. The rest is history. Now, we are privileged that we have here John Worsley, who painted this magnificent painting of the hurricane incident, which now belongs to ophthalmology. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Lord Hunt of King's Heath, Her Majesty's Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Health.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I say what a great honour it is to speak on behalf of Her Majesty's Government at this marvellous celebration of the achievement of Mr. Harold Ridley. It's also wonderful to be with so many distinguished guests from many countries of the world, and indeed to have met with Mrs. Ridley and other members of Harold Ridley's family. I think that the story of Harold Ridley is both heartwarming and inspiring to us all. Against the odds, and often in the face of professional hostility, Mr. Ridley, in effect, saved the sight of at least 200 million people worldwide. And the story of the lens is a quite remarkable achievement, originating, as we so eloquently heard, from the operations on World War II fighter pilots. But I think more remarkable still is actually the story of Harold Ridley. He is, as I've discovered in the last few days when we were doing a photographic session here last week, he is an exceptionally good-natured and modest person. And his aim was the advancement of science and the contribution to the health of the people. And he and the late John Pike, Rayner's optical scientist, refused to patent the lens and agreed to develop it for the benefit of everyone. This story is really a remarkable story of achievement, of cooperation between inventor, science, and manufacturer. And I think in this night of celebration, we should also acknowledge the contribution of Rayner. I think it is a source of considerable satisfaction that it has continued from strength to strength over those years, and indeed that the company now exports 75% of its production to over 40 countries. It remains a centre of excellence, innovation, and service. I think for those of us in the National Health Service and charged with its management, it is also interesting to recollect that we too are 50 years old. Indeed, back in those days, the NHS was just starting out on a mission to banish the cost of ill health to people and to provide a decent, comprehensive health service to everyone. And I think that it has fulfilled that expectation very well. But 50 years later, we face another challenge: to make the NHS fast, flexible, high quality, and fit for the new millennium. And just as 50 years ago, when Harold Ridley was pioneering his invention, the crucial link between research and development, business, industry, and high-quality healthcare is as crucial as ever. Harold has told me of the years it took before the benefits of what he did was widely recognized throughout the service. And I think we all face the same challenge today in the world of healthcare, ensuring that robust and proven new inventions, new techniques, and new drugs are rapidly developed and brought into the everyday use for the benefit of all patients. I think that Harold Ridley and his achievements must surely be an inspiration to us all in seeking to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and privilege to be here tonight to share with you this wonderful celebration of a wonderful achievement, and I'm most grateful for the honor. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, my Lord Lieutenant, my Lords, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome and then pray silence for the toast to Mr. Harold Ridley, Fellow of the Royal Society, proposed by Professor Peter Choice.
My Lord Lieutenant, ladies and gentlemen, and my lords, ordinarily speaking, I don't sort of read from notes. But this is a very unique occasion, as the Americans would say, and I must try to do justice to it. My dear wife over there, I usually do what she says that the duty of an after-dinner speaker is to stand up, speak up, and shut up. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that, because here we are, practically at the end of the 20th century, in the presence of somebody who has changed the face of medicine forever. It's a great, great honor to be here. I was introduced to Mr. Ridley in January 1948 by the dean, the postgraduate dean of the Moorfields Eye Hospital, who said to me that Harold Ridley had the mind of a rapier, the hands of a concert pianist, but he did not suffer fools gladly. Would I please not let him down? All I can say is that Harold and I, bless his heart, have been close from that day to this. I never doubted that he was right about lens implantation, and I was not going to be frightened off the subject by senior members of the profession. However, by 1953, it was clear that my devotion to his ideas was going to inhibit my own career. I was not then a consultant. At this point, the National Health Service, I'm sure Lord Hunt would be pleased to hear this, came to my rescue. Appointed to the Southend-on-Sea group of hospitals, I was the only consultant, believe it or not, for 14 years to 350,000 people, many of whom seemed to me to have cataracts. So I had a wonderful time exploring the new modality HR, as we all call him, those who know him well, had created. We were both scrupulously careful to put the patient's interests first. But those were very exciting times in which to practice eye surgery. The compensation culture of today was way in the future, and I wonder if I might respectfully suggest to Lord Hunt, an excellent speaker who clearly thrives on his occupation, that he's got to try and find some way of putting back into the practice of medicine today the excitement and the drama and the unfinancial rewards of practicing medicine. Around 1963, it became clear to both Harold and myself, I didn't call him Harold in those days, oh dear me no, it was still Mr. Ridley. It was clear to both of us that since the establishment was so unhelpful, we would do better to set up our own intraocular lens establishment, now known as the International Intraocular Implant Club, which we did on Bastille Day, the 14th of July, 1966. Some of you may have seen an excellent article in the Daily Telegraph on Saturday. There was a very nice photograph of Harold, and you can see in the photograph that he's wearing the tie with the logo of the IIIC on it, a contribution from my dear wife over there on table 8. It is very gratifying. He was our first president, and I acted as secretary-treasurer. The group photograph taken on that occasion and has been widely reproduced since then shows, amongst others, the late Warren Rees from Philadelphia, possibly Ridley's most important American disciple. There was Strampelli from Rome, who invented the anterior chamber implant, which could be used as on aphakic eyes as well as ordinary cataract eyes, which was very useful, and I found it so. And we also had Binkhorst from Holland. Alas, he's no longer with us. Ted Epstein from South Africa is with us today, aged 89. Where are you, Ted? Please stand up. We have Slavy Fyodorov from Russia. Please stand up. We have Sandy Brown from Bristol. Please stand up. We have Michael Roper Hall from Birmingham. Please stand up, Michael. They all look so goddamn young, don't they? I think it is very gratifying that this humble nucleus of lens implant surgeons, amounting to 16, is still showing signs of considerable activity. But we must not forget a very crucial component of that original group, John Pike of Rayner, without whom, and without the work of the plastics division of ICI, there might never have been any intraocular lenses. Today, almost all eye surgeons, wherever they are in practice, perform pseudophakic surgery without losing any sleep over what they're doing. So much so that nobody nowadays knows really how many are being inserted, how many are being put in China, for God's sake, how many billions of population do they have, and how many millions of cataract patients. We really don't know, but it is fantastic what Ridley has achieved. There is no doubt that the collaboration between Rayner and Ridley and the plastics division of ICI was exceedingly fruitful. In a wider context, I submit that Ridley's work had a catalytic effect on developments in ophthalmology, such as vastly improved instrumentation, the Swedish invention of viscoelastic materials, very, very important. Even the whole spectrum of refractive surgery owes a great deal to Ridley. In an even wider context, I believe that the reputation of British medicine has been greatly enhanced by his work. A point of view I brought to the attention of the Prime Minister's wife, Cherie Booth, QC, when I went to number 10 Downing Street earlier this year, so that she could make the video tribute to Harold Ridley, which was shown at the ASCRS meeting at Seattle, the ASCRS meeting, in April of this year. I think she got the message. She's not a stupid woman. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that I'm now drawing towards the close, as Lady Godiva said, towards the end of her chilly, wintry ride in Coventry many hundreds of years ago. It only remains for me to say that at a personal level, I have always found Harold and Elizabeth and their family to be unfailingly kind and loyal and generous with their hospitality and their help and advice. He and I, had a very tough time of it for many years. Nobody enjoys fighting the establishment. But we are lucky to have lived long enough to know that our sufferings were not in vain. It is very rare for a major, and I mean major, medico-scientific advance to be attributed to just one individual. And it has been a tremendous privilege to have been so close to HR for so long, and an even greater privilege to propose his health along with that of Elizabeth. To Harold and Elizabeth Ridley.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding. The toast is Harold Ridley and Elizabeth.
Did you like that?
Loved it. Take you up here, sir. Round this way. Take it. Now there's a big step there. Step. Come up the step. Up step. Yeah, there's a big step. That's it. That's it. Oh. Wait. There we go. That's it. Well done. Right, sir. Yeah, that's difficult. Turn this way. Stay here. Sorry about this. There we go, sir. Hold his hand. Hold his hand. Am I right? Speak into this, sir. Yeah, into what? Yeah. The microphone's at home. Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, our friends, how can I thank you for the wonderful send-off you've given me, and my wife, too. Because Elizabeth has played her part. And it's very hard to know how to thank you for your kindness to us. In old age, when all is past, I've had a wonderful time. An arduous life, but worthwhile. And I think how much I owe to God for giving me so much support. I simply had a wonderful time. I can go on talking like this for a long time, but I must remember we are near the end of our day, and I thank you all very much indeed for your kindness to us. Good night. Can you come on this side, sir? Ladies and gentlemen, I call on Mr. Nicholas Ridley to make a response and also to propose the toast to Rayner. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nicholas Ridley.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen,
It is perhaps difficult for us now to imagine that over 50 years ago, the design of the first intraocular lens was discussed in my father's car in Cavendish Square, just off Harley Street, and midway between his consulting rooms and the headquarters of Rayner's, which was then in New Bond Street. The late John Pike of Rayner's was a man who was responsible for the manufacture of the world's very first intraocular lens. And it is sad to reflect that whereas my father has fortunately been able to witness the successful development of IOL surgery, John Pike is very sadly not with us. I know that I speak for all of us here this evening when I say how very grateful we are to Rayner's for holding this banquet in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the first implant. And at the expense of repeating what has already been said, what a very appropriate place this National Science Museum is to hold this dinner. It is now my very great pleasure and honor to ask you to stand and to raise your glasses to Rayner's. Thank you very much indeed. To Rayner's. Thank you very much. Oh, is it? Oh, thank you.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome and then pray silence for a response on behalf of Rayner's by Mr. Ian Collins, Managing Director.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, early this summer, at a lunch I had with Mr. Ridley at his cottage, he asked me how long I had worked for my company. And very proudly I told him I'd been with the company for 40 years. Ah, he said, you're a new boy. And yet, being here tonight, in the presence of those who conceived and brought about the birth of the IOL, and those who made it happen, I feel like a new boy. We're very proud at Rayner to have been involved in this. And I'm standing here for people like John Pike, as Nicholas had mentioned, who was the first to be approached by Mr. Ridley. I'm standing here for Peter Cordell, who did so much, and for Ernest Ford, who's still fondly remembered by many people. We are immensely proud to have been part of this story, and I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome Mr. Patrick Condon.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege and honor to be here to represent not only Irish ophthalmology, but European Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery at this incredible function to honor one of the most famous innovators in the world. We have heard today at our meeting, which we had this afternoon, of the advances that have been made during the last 50 years since Harold Ridley first put the first intraocular lens in 50 years ago, almost to the day. It's been an incredible scientific development, but this has happened in other fields of electronics, all other technology, but we are fortunate enough that it's happened to us. I think that Rayner's have a big place to play in this. They have developed an association with Harold and with us as colleagues in the development of a product that has been superb. During the last 50 years, we have seen the complications that have occurred with IOLs. We've seen the quick-rich American entrepreneurs getting into IOLs, selling quick, but yet getting in complications from some of the products that have not been to the high standards that Rayner's have developed over the years. We have been saddened to a certain extent by the fact that Rayner's have fallen a little bit behind the times in development and research. But today at our meeting, the last paper showed that Rayner's are a potential force in the new development of new products, which will put British IOLs back on the marketplace in a very strong position. And that I am very heartened to hear today. Also, I have a personal interest in all of this. Not only the fact that my father was an ophthalmologist before me, and that he used the early choice lenses in his patients' eyes, going back into the 1950s. And when I took up my job in Waterford Regional Hospital, I was very privileged to see and honored to see some of the patients that he had implanted with the choice implants, and to see how happy those patients were. So, you know, I have been putting lenses in for 20 years. I've seen the benefits that it has given to my patients, but also I have a child, Jonathan, who is with us at the moment in London here, who is a Down syndrome. And at the age of 18, he's now 22 years of age, developed cataracts in both eyes, and also a keratoconus in one eye. And that child has had both implants done, and only for the technology that Harold Ridley has developed, my kid would be blind. So that is to me a very personal thing. And not only that, but he's excelled at gymnastics. He's won a gold and bronze medal at the Special Olympics in Connecticut 3 years ago, even with a disability of diminished sight and also a mental handicap. So I have a special interest in all of this, not only from my patient's point of view, but from my family point of view, and I would like to pay tribute to Harold Ridley for the magnificent contribution that he has made to all of human mankind. Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce David Apple, Professor David Apple's wife, Anne. We are so sorry that David could not be with us here because he initiated this with Rayner's almost 2 years ago, and he conceived the idea with Rayner's that this would be an incredible opportunity to honor Harold Ridley. So I would like to ask Anne to come and give us a few words. Thank you, Anne.
I want to thank Rayner for inviting both me and my daughter Jacqueline to be with you for this incredible evening. However, I must tell you, it would give me far greater pleasure if I were sitting where you are and David was in my place. One thing David told me as we talked about what I might say this evening, he said, "Now please don't talk about me." And my daughter said to me last night, "Mom, this is the perfect opportunity for you to talk about David. He's not there, and he's so humble." But I can only talk about David and his work in light of Harold and Harold's innovations and what he's done for the world. Barely a month after I met David in 1993, I was in their Harold and Elizabeth's living room in Stapleford, meeting Harold Ridley. I knew at that point, even before I knew that David and I would marry, that this was one incredible person, and I knew how much he meant to David. I believe it was in 1985 when John Pierce and Peter Choice said to Harold, "There's some young American doctor writing papers on IOLs. Maybe you should meet him." And very soon after that, David made his first trip over to spend time with Harold. When I met Harold, along with David in '93, David was working on Harold's biography for the Royal Society and is still and was then quite honored to be asked to participate in that. Virtually, Harold's work was internationally unknown at the time that David began working with him. David's work has confirmed Harold's work and it continues to confirm Harold's work. Harold has given David a lifetime of wonderful work, reinforcement, and has given him his profession and meaning to his life. Jim Davison said earlier today in a talk that it's really due to David's pioneering in the U.S. that IOLs have been as successful as they have been. And I know that's true, many of us do, but here again, if it weren't for Harold's brilliance, that would not have happened. So Harold, on behalf of the millions who can now see because of you and the millions who will see because of you, I thank you. And for David and myself, I want to thank you for all that we have learned from you, not just scientifically, but due to your fortitude, your devotion to Elizabeth and your family, and your keen sense of life and its circumstances. I congratulate you and thank you all for having us here.